So let's talk about psychology and white supremacy. I'm finding myself more and more kind of rebellious against the modern psychiatry and psychology just because of how much of the white supremacist type hierarchical thinking is present in there, and how we rely so heavily on the white lens, and how the white people of the world back in the day came up with ideas on how normal people should operate, and now we take this as a default. However, when you look at the way indigenous peoples used to view, humans and their identity, you see that they may not have had the technology, the means to, measure and some things accurately. However, they fundamentally had a more dialectical approach to mental health and the whole of the human. They didn't perceive the human to be the static creature that always would operate according to some unwritten rules. And of course, white medicine and white research brought us a ton of discoveries, and I'm not completely disregarding it, and I'm not saying all white people did was useless. Of course, I'm not saying that, but it's just that the dominating force nowadays in psychiatry and psychology and in medicine is so whitewashed, and it really gets on my nerves because I see how much harm it can bring, and I personally have been somewhat harmed by these approaches where you see yourself through this lens of a white man, mostly, and you realize just how most of the people don't actually operate the way they're supposed to, because we are so flexible and adaptable, and our internal processes cannot be explained as, simply black and white, yes or no binaries. And I find the dialectical approach to be much more helpful because it helps you to hold on to, all of these different fragments of yourself, if you will, at the same time, and understand that those contradictions, ultimately, they do not cancel each other out. They are interlinked, and they help each other move, and they help the processes that need to happen. And again, that is not to dismiss the progress that we made in psychiatry and psychology, but it always rubs me the wrong way when people think that, only the 19th and 20th century medicine and psychology are science-based and they deserve of our attention, and this is the entire history of humankind in a nutshell, but that's just not true. So I wish we expanded more on this and looked into the past for more lessons, and looked at the past ways humans lived and incorporated it into the modern realm of being. Let me try and think of an example so that you kind of know what I'm talking about, because I know I'm kind of speaking very vaguely and generally. So the example I can think of is this separation of thought and emotion. Like, these two are distinct processes. Like, there are certain parts of the brain that are only responsible for your cognitive abilities, and other parts of the brain that are responsible for processing of emotions, and like the limbic system is the only thing that's responsible for emotions. But in modern research shows that that's not true, actually, and I haven't really looked heavily into it. It's a lot to consume and process, but there is this new, I would say, theory that there are multiple parts of the brain that are responsible for both cognitive processes and emotional processes, and these two are not like distinct areas, and therefore there is also no hierarchy in thinking versus feeling, because in the white world, very often we put our cognitive abilities and our thinking processes at the top of this hierarchy, as if this was the ultimate human thing to do and to be, and this is better than just feeling and emoting. And it also kind of seeps into the whole gender thing, like supposedly women are more emotive and more emotional than men, which actually research has proven not to be true, that men are actually the ones who are more emotional, which is like, it doesn't matter. What matters is this hierarchy where we think that if we can put something into words and we can explain it to someone, this is the ultimate best thing we can do as humans. And whereas where we, for example, dance with each other and express ourselves towards each other in this manner, this is fine, this is good, but this is not as great as, putting things into words and like documenting them and analyzing them with words. So to me, this disconnect between thoughts and emotions very much caused me harm, because I used to also adhere to this hierarchy of emotions are inferior to thoughts, and I try to intellectualize every single aspect of my being. And that hurt me because I wouldn't allow my feelings to just be. And ultimately, it led to a lot of delays in my emotional growth. And I would say that I am now learning things that I should have learned like 20 years ago or so. And I know that this was a big part and still is a big part of the modern ideology, where the thinky things are way more important than the emotional outbursts. And we consider emotions to be disruptive and something that needs to be controlled. But in reality, indigenous people and dialectical view of the world help us understand that emotions and thoughts are very closely interlinked, and the modern science appears to be supporting that as well. And processing emotions through, bodily experiences are just as valid as thinking about your emotions. And very often you don't need to think about your emotions and like rationalize them and put them in those neat little categories and boxes. And this is something that I've personally been trying to do more of in the past few months. And it's tremendously helpful. And it helped me process so much of my grief and trauma of the past. And I am really eager to continue doing so. And I'm just amazed at how, it all kind of builds up, right? You think, oh, white supremacy doesn't really affect me. But it does. If you have this idea in your mind that displaying emotions and feeling emotions is somewhat inferior to talking and processing mentally and, writing things down and speaking about them eloquently, that this is better than just sitting and crying or, shaking or, somehow expressing yourself through various other means is inferior, then you are also affected by white supremacy, even if you are not close to the imperial core, even if you don't know much about Western psychology and psychiatry. This affects our daily lives. So this is why I think that reading theory is immensely helpful. For me, Erich Fromm is one of my favorite psychology-related authors, who also was some kind of a Marxist, right? It is an argument still whether he was a true Marxist or not, but his works really helped me make sense of a lot of this white men's type of issues that I personally experienced as well, even though I'm not white and I'm not a man. So yeah, and I highly encourage you to also give this a thought and let me know what you think about this now, and let's keep this conversation going, and I hope you have a good day, and I'll talk to you sometime later.